This is a Spyderco Mantra. The steel is CPM M4. My interest in this knife came off of the Delica and the similarities between this knife and the Delica. The size, the ergonomics. I was really interested in this knife for the steel and the grind and the blade geometry. It's a very thin grind, and what you're talking about here is a small slicer. After getting the knife, I measured on the primary grind. I came in about 1 millimeter past the secondary bevel, and I measured around a ½ millimeter going up the blade. So it is a fairly thin grind. It's not quite as thin as the Delica, but it is thin. It's good build quality. I wasn't concerned with the knife having a flipper on it. I know a lot of people buying this knife wanted a flipper. That was the last thing that I cared about. Like I said, I was looking at the build quality and the geometry of the blade and the steel. But the flipper is fine. I've heard people talk about the flipper not having as good of action as they wanted, and I haven't had any problems with this. It works flipping in multiple ways, pulling it back, push button. It seems fine. The knife is light. It carries well. I'm generally pleased with it. If you want to avoid using a flipper, it doesn't seem to get in the way. So, in getting the knife, I went to sharpen it, and I started with the Shaptons, the Shapton compact stones, and I used them. I had reprofiled it to 30 inclusive, and when I went to sharpen it with the Shaptons, it got sharp. I mean, the sharpness did come up on it. It was cutting free hanging hairs and all that, but I noticed after the fact that the grind lines from reprofiling were still there. They were still on the secondary bevel, and when I thumbed the edge, it didn't feel like I wanted it to. I mean, it was sharp. Most people would have looked at it and said, "Hey, that's successful. I'm good." But I've worked with M4 a lot, and I know how sharp it can get to the touch. I don't really care that it was sharp enough to cut a free hanging hair. I could feel it, and I could feel that it wasn't at its full potential. So I went and I resharpened it again, this time using the DMT diafold diamond sharpeners. I'm guessing that the abrasive in the Shaptons had a little bit of trouble with the vanadium content in the steel. When I used the diamond sharpeners, I went coarse, fine, extra fine, and extra extra fine, and then I finished with a Spyderco ultra fine rod. Then I moved on to strops and went through a series of strops, and the edge that came up from that, it was night and day between that and the Shaptons. Again, it was cutting free hanging hairs. It was hair whittling sharp. I had brought it to where I wanted to bring it. Overall, I'm impressed with the knife. I like it. It fits the need of a small slicer, and I wanted a small slicer with a full flat grind in M4. The ergonomics on it are similar to the Delica. You can see coming off the ricasso that the plunge line is set at an angle, giving maximum cutting surface. I think that was smart, under the idea of giving maximum cutting edge to the knife. So after sharpening the knife, that second sharpening on the using diamond, I was carrying the knife and I was using it, and it was fairly non-specific use. There was some boxes broken down, packages open, envelopes, paper that needed to be cut. I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing. Something that I've been playing with recently is seeing how long a given steel or a given sharpening will hold a hair whittling edge. People ask that. People want to know, if you sharpen it and bring it to hair whittling, how long does it last? And I've seen discussion about steels put through the powder steel process as opposed to more basic steels, and which one holds longer. And I mean, that's something that's come up recently. I carried this knife for 10 days using it. It wasn't the only knife that I used on a daily basis, but I did use it on a daily basis. And when I thought about doing this video, I went to see, I thought, okay, well, if I strop it on a 1/4 micron strop, will it bring the edge back? So before stropping it, I went and I dragged a hair over the edge to see that it wouldn't cut, and I figured then I'll strop it and I'll see if it comes back. And on dragging the hair over it, before stropping it, it was still cutting free hanging hairs. It was still hair whittling sharp. I was really surprised by that. I mean, 10 days of use is good. When you hear most people talk about a hair whittling edge, they talk about you lose it on that first cut. And I'm not saying that that can't be the case. I'm not saying with some steels or some sharpening methods that isn't the case. But this was still there after 10 days. So it's a testament to M4, especially if you do it right using the right abrasives. I went ahead and did one more sharpening and documented it. I didn't have footage of the first 2 sharpenings to edit into the video. So I started in on the diamond sharpeners, the DMT difold sharpeners. I started with a coarse diamond, worked my way through that, moved to fine, then extra fine, then extra fine. And with the DMT sharpeners, my movements were very deliberate. It was spine to edge, that's it. I wasn't making any movements from the tip towards the handle of the knife. I was really setting the scratch pattern. It was, like I said, it was a very deliberate thing. After I moved through the DMT sharpeners, I moved on to the Spyderco Ultrafine. I worked with that, again, being specific in my movements and very deliberate with it. After I had traded a burr from side to side with the Ultrafine, I made several light strokes moving up the blade just for burr reduction. I then moved on to strops, and I started with a 5 micron compound on wood. I worked my way through that compound, and when I was done, the burr was completely gone. It was completely removed. I checked the edge just for the fun of it, and it was able to cut a hair. It was hair whittling already. I mean, that's really early on the strops, but you know, like I've said, M4 gets very sharp very fast. That's one of the reasons that people love it. After the 5 micron, I moved on to a 3.5 micron, worked my way through that, moved on to a 2.5 micron, and then a 1.5 micron. And getting the knife hair whittling at 5 micron really allows me to do however much or however little I want with the rest of the strops. I was really able to move through them fast and not worry about it. And with this sharpening, I'm not going for finish. I don't care about the finish. I'm going for sharpness. I don't care about the aesthetics of the knife. So it really didn't matter how fast I moved through. After that, I moved on to a 1 micron diamond spray on wood. I worked with that. The diamond spray does cut really fast. After that, the knife was, the edge was extremely sharp, extremely aggressive. I easily could have stopped there. I mean, it was catching and cutting hairs. It was, you know, a very impressive edge at that point. But after that, I went ahead and continued. I worked with a 1/4 micron diamond spray on leather, and then a 0.05 micron diamond spray on leather, and then a 0.025 micron diamond spray on leather. The edge after that was as sharp as it was going to get for me. Nothing to complain about. Extremely aggressive. Just to the touch, it'll bite right into the skin, which is exactly where I wanted it. So after that last sharpening, I'm going to let it ride for a little bit. I'm just going to leave it alone, use it, carry it, see how long it keeps whittling hairs, see how fast it will come back on maybe a 1 micron, 1/4 micron strop. You know, do a double-sided strop with those two micron ratings and work with that and see how long I can keep it going.